Welcome to the Homeschool Mom Chat. I'm Teresa Wiedrich, the certified life coach and graduated homeschool mom who's been through the ups and downs of this homeschool mom life. I get it, homeschooling is beautiful. I say it's charmed, but it's also messy and sometimes exhausting. It's definitely rewarding, and I can say that after almost 2 decades of homeschooling. I've also learned that it's not about academics alone. It's a lifestyle that enables us toward greater authenticity and a deep sense of purpose. After nearly 2 decades of homeschooling, I've learned that the challenges we face aren't hurdles alone. They're opportunities to grow, connect, and align with what really matters to us in our specific families. And I know firsthand how overwhelming it can feel at times, certainly seasons can feel. That's why I'm passionate about supporting homeschool moms to shed what's not working so they can find clarity, confidence in their homeschool mom journeys. So today, in this episode, the episode that I released this morning on the Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast, which I titled The 6 Challenges Every Struggling Homeschool Mom Faces, I offer transformative tools that can help you shape a more positive homeschool experience. And I will be doing that for the next 2 months, about 7 weeks, a podcast series on the Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast. But today I'm joined by Jenny Mouse. She is a fellow homeschool mom and author of her new book, Brian the Brain, Ready, Set, Go. And she's bringing her expertise and her personal insights to the table. So get ready for a meaningful conversation packed with loads of tips and inspiration about kids' emotional health, resilience or fostering resilience, building grit, learning how learning happens in the brain, and how it can naturally unfold in our home. So I welcome you, Jenny, to the conversation. Or at least I will surely try. There we go. Yes. Hey, lady.
Hold on. Technical difficulties. There we go.
Always nice to see you, Jenny. Jenny,
You too.
did I pronounce your last name correctly? Because I think I remember there was a different name that you had on
Yeah.
all of your socials.
So my pen name is Jenny Mouse,
Okay,
and my real life name is Jennifer Meisner.
right. That's right. Okay, so I don't remember which one I put on the podcast initially, but I've had a conversation with you in the last probably about 3-4 years ago with your first book release. Would you tell me or tell the listeners about your book?
Yeah. So this is actually my third book that I have out now. It's actually Brian the Brain Mindset Go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think you said Ready Set Go. So just to clarify, Mindset Go if you're trying to search it.
Yes.
Um, but it's the third book in the series, and each one has a different lesson about the brain in it. So my first one, I think it was after I published my first one that I talked to you the first time.
Yeah.
So that one is about how the brain works. The second one is about the different parts of the brain. And then the new one is the third one, which is about how the brain learns.
I
So
love it.
those are my
Remind me your inspiration. And for those that haven't met you yet, what was the inspiration behind your books?
Yeah. So my brain works a little bit differently. I had a learning disability as a kid, and needed support with learning. And when I went to school and to university and started learning about the brain, I started to pick up these kind of tricks and tips on how to learn more efficiently. So
Right.
instead of like reading the same textbook page 500 times,
Yeah.
that might be a bit of exaggeration, but
I
and
know.
not absorbing any of it,
Yeah.
I started to pick up tricks like read the questions in the back of the chapter and then go and read the book intentionally so that you're looking for those answers. Things like that made a really, really big difference to myself. And then working with children, I went, we need to be teaching kids these lessons in the beginning so that they're not waiting until they're, in their 16s or
College.
20s learning about these things.
Interestingly, that is actually when I started to learn about learning. I was really intent on doing better in college, and I picked up a book on how to study or how to read. And it was very much similar to what you were just describing, but also highlighting certain sections or noticing when there were, concept breaks, when there were significant chunks of concepts that shifted into a different theme, and various things like that really did help me order how I was thinking about what I was learning. So that was my experience also in college. But you're saying, why don't we do that for kids that are a lot younger?
Yeah, and I think like kindergarten should be how to learn 101, right? Like, wouldn't that be amazing if that was our focus from the beginning was like, not let's shove this stuff into the kids' brains, but let's, do a hands-on, you know, exploration of how to learn and how the brain works and start from the beginning.
That's right. Yes. And so now, how many kids do you have now? Do you have,
I, I have three. So I
you have,
have my youngest is 8 months old now.
yeah, perfect age. I love that age. Big chubby
It's,
cheeks and just sits on your lap and is generally very happy, but doesn't know how to get anywhere yet, hopefully. By the
well, he's
third, you don't want them to
crawling,
move.
so tornado has begun.
It has? Okay. Yeah, that's very cool. And how old are your oldest kids?
7 and 5.
Nice. Okay. Beautiful age. That's such a fun age. That's the age where you get to explore all the things that you didn't know before, and now you're seeing it through your kids' eyes. It's a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah. So, what are you seeing that when your kids are the age that they are, and you're, you know, knowing how to engage kids that are outside your home is always so very different than when you're in your home. And that is a learning research study, really, beyond anything. Seeing the learning that you had about learning or child development or those things, and then bringing it in and experiencing it with your children.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we are constantly talking about topics that I'm very passionate about, like growth mindset, grit. I'm reading books about those topics constantly. So and then I talk to the kids about them at home. So it's pretty neat to be able to, I guess try out in a sense some of these ideas that I have on teaching how to learn from the beginning with my own kids, and teach them about these concepts that I think are so important.
Yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't come without its challenges because sometimes your own kids are the most challenging to teach and to.
I know it well. I remember, I mean, this isn't the same concept as actually teaching learning opportunities, but before I had children, I worked in the perinatal float pool in a major hospital. And so I did pediatrics and labor and delivery and postpartum, antepartum, a variety of things like that. And I knew exactly what I was supposed to do with a baby. And then I had
Yeah,
one.
your world turns upside down.
My world turned upside down. And it turns out the recipe cards with every last bit of information that I knew I needed wasn't nearly as applicable. So by the time my third came around and I was in the hospital bed and a postpartum nurse came in and pointed to the big poster that said you shouldn't sleep with your kids because then you might suffocate them, I was like, good. I'll just stay here with my baby.
Yeah.
So tell me what you've learned with your little ones. So what have you learned about learning, both the learning that you had before you had kids and also now that you have children?
So I learn a lot from watching them.
Mm.
One of the things I find fascinating is the difference in how my brain works and how my oldest's brain works, because he is a very like he gravitates towards math and science, and I always love science, but math is always a tricky one for me. So he's like taking out a math workbook and doing it for fun, things like that,
Yeah,
which
I
is
get
great, which is awesome.
that's
So
my
I
experience.
try to watch my own language, with math, because I don't want to tell him like, oh yeah, math is hard. I have a hard time with math, so I want to put that idea in his head when he's loving it. But one thing I like have found is the hands-on learning experiences are so they stick with the kids so well. So one thing I'm fascinated by is my husband. He fixes up like old Game Boys and stuff.
Really?
And to me, I'm like, well, it's broken, it's junk, right? Because I don't know how you know like that tech works. And he opens it up, and it's like and he started this with my son my son was probably like 3 or 4 when they started fixing them up together. And he'll take out like rubbing alcohol. Okay, you've got to clean this up and that, and like make sure that my son's using gloves and everything because any corrosion, they're not touching it or anything. But watching him learn, and it's like a whole different experience than I had. I'm like, oh, I guess technology isn't just magic that I press a button and magic happens. It's cool to see that work. And that's actually something that I think it's actually a good analogy for the brain and learning how the brain works, because I think for a lot of people it's like the brain's magic. It just does the things we want it to do. But if we like look at the different parts and what they do, then we start to go, oh, okay, that does make sense. And that like, okay, I see why I need to practice now and stuff like that. So that hands-on learning with the kids, with the brain, with tech. My son does, whenever I do markets with my books, my son does plant sales that he grows
I love
himself. So those
that.
learning experiences have just been so fun to explore with the kids.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it is. That age really is so much fun. So much fun. I had last year, I had a load of probably 3 to 7 year olds in my, because their moms are coming to look at all the curriculum that I have. Now that I'm graduated, I've got loads of stuff still. And I was selling a bunch of stuff and I was seeing what it was like. I was just noticing the families and how they were, the moms, how they were engaging their 5 to 7 year olds. And every single one of them had different kids. No surprise. And every single one of them had kids that were fully alive and engaged and asking so interesting questions. And then I hear online often that people are worried about what curriculum should I get for my children, because we want to create learning opportunities for them. And there's a dissonance there. We have this idea, an educational, conventional educational idea, that you need to give the children or kids learning kits and learning opportunities and information. But actually, if you just answer their questions, you'll have a full, complete curriculum right there, especially between those ages. It's so much fun.
And you'll end up learning as much as they do.
100%. I learned so much math, Jenny, like you have no idea. Except actually, I topped out by grade 9. And they're on their own after that. Actually, they're with tutors or various people at that point. Yeah. So, what practical things would you talk about the brain development that we need to know as moms?
Yeah, so the new book especially is it talks about how the brain learns and how mistakes actually help us learn. Like talking about those topics, and I mean working it in anytime your kid makes a mistake, changing your wording and saying, oh, well, that's an interesting learning opportunity, and highlighting for them like that this is something you can learn from. But the book talks about, so in the story, it's the main character is doing a competition, and I made it. It's kind of like I don't know if you've heard Tough Mudder, but like obstacle course kind of um, race, so that she's having to learn all these different skills.
Yeah.
And it introduces how when she makes a mistake, her brain's actually learning from it. And it talks about how the message is sent through neurons and how they work together to learn and build a network. So that kind of conversation, talking about like how does the brain, making it as visual as possible. Like I have like pictures of like neural networks kind of thing in there, and how the visual, but also I think like having books that work into, like, I mean, I have a whole collection of books about the brain, not just mine, but other ones too, that we read, because whenever I come across one, I have to buy it. But having those books about the brain that you can read with your kids, and introduce those concepts in a simple way, but then also taking it one step further, and when something comes up in their life, using that as a teachable moment to say, oh, you made a mistake, what a great learning opportunity. And oh, you're having trouble with this. Well, that's something that we can work on together, and you can get better at this. And the book talks about practice doesn't make perfect, it makes progress. So a lot of the growth mindset lessons I've learned over the years writing these series, I've worked into this one.
That's
um,
that's actually one that I see on repeat when I'm doing my research on perfectionism, because I'm sure that this is a common experience for many people, but because I work with homeschool moms, I can see it is a very frequent experience of a homeschool mom to want to do things perfectly. And so that phrase right there, progress over perfection, is definitely one that I've heard often when I'm doing my writing.
Yeah, I think it's such an important one because um, we don't really like what is perfection anyways, right? Like, and I always talk to, so I started these books off actually as a course that I taught through an online platform called OutSchool.
Yeah.
Um, and I talk to the students in that class about this and say, like, every time there's a record, somebody breaks it, right? That's why we have a book of world records. If there was the
Yeah.
best person in the world at this
Yeah.
skill, we wouldn't have a book of records because that would just be it. So what is perfect anyways? If somebody can break what we think is perfect. So if you think, well, this is the best that anyone can ever be, you're never going to get better than it. But if you focus on getting a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, like you don't know how high you'll climb. And I really like that image of the ladder with the small rungs and small steps versus the ladder with the big rungs, because a lot of the times when we're focusing on perfection, we're trying to make that giant leap up to a rung that we cannot reach at that point in time. Whereas if we're focusing on progress, we're climbing these little steps and we can ultimately get a lot higher, a lot faster with those little steps that we're
That's
climbing.
right. And for me in my work, when I'm working with women, I often go to, okay, it's probably not about you trying to enact your entire plan and make it happen without interruption, because that's not going to happen. But you're probably not wanting that. You're probably not wanting to finish the curriculum by the end of the year. Like, I know that people think that that's what they want, but that's not really it. There's something rooted in our sense of worth or our lack of worth, and we're trying to overcompensate by being perfect. And so then I usually have conversations around that. But whether it is whatever conversation point we're having right now, on whether it's with our kids or with us as moms, however we have practiced thinking or practiced learning, we're developing neural networks. And what is the phrase? It's slipping my mind right now. It really shouldn't. It's so common. But when the neurons wire together.
Oh, neurons that wire together fire together. Yeah, that's a favorite.
Yeah, yeah. And so we get into a practice of engaging in certain ways, whether it's thinking about, our sense of, competence or worth in how we're doing things, whether it's perfect enough, but also for our kids when they are trying to overcome something, some challenge or learning challenge. How do we help them, support them, so that they can create new neural networks? We wouldn't say that to them, although we might, because we have your books now. But how do we actually help them to develop those new neural networks so that they can actually fire together differently or wire together differently?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So, when we when when our neurons, like you said, when they fire together, they wire together. So, if we are doing two things at the same time, then they're going to build an association. So, if you like, you can work in a subject that's difficult for your kid with something that comes easy to them, like using basketball to teach math concepts, stuff like that, because they already have this like very profound developed network to go with math, let's say. So if you work that, or sorry, basketball in this example, it could work the other way around too. If someone doesn't get basketball, maybe you can work it into math. That could be fun, actually. But so they can use that network, and then you can help wire that math onto it, and it's going to help it stick instead of essentially starting from scratch or from a network that's kind of weak. And it's like when they looked at the brain and like some learning disabilities, I was looking at a study that they did about dyslexia, and the fact that in individuals with dyslexia, like their pathways for reading were like wiggly, whereas the pathways like in a typical brain, like a child that wasn't struggling with reading, the pathways were straight. So then you're going, okay, the person with dyslexia obviously is having to do a whole lot more work to get goal. But if we wire it with something that's strong, it might help them develop that network.
That's
Um,
right. Yeah, that actually is very congruent with the strengths-based approach to really educating a child at home, focusing on their strengths, like you said, basketball, so that you can incorporate math concepts.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so the strength-based learning is fantastic. And then practice. So every time we do something again and again and again, that pathway gets stronger. So neural pathways actually get thicker the more we do them. So once we have that pathway there, the more we use it, the clearer it's going to become. And we're going to essentially, if you when they've done practice with these kids that have dyslexia, over time, that pathway gets stronger. And it might still not look straight, but it will be stronger. So even though some of these kids are struggling with these concepts, doesn't mean that they always have to struggle with them. And sometimes you actually get interesting things going on because the brain's wired a little differently. So it can lead to talents in other areas. But practicing it over and over again. So if you have a child that's struggling with reading, figure out how can we get that reading practice in. If they are bored out of their minds and they are not enjoying it, it's not going to really help them, because the other thing is our brain responds to emotion, our memory responds to emotion. So if our emotion is bored, we are not saving those memories. But if it's excited and having fun, we are going to. So whether that's choosing video games that have a lot of reading for your kid to practice reading in an environment that they enjoy, or if it's, practicing reading in comic books where there's more pictures and it's more fun for them. My son, when he started reading, he liked reading brand names for a while. So if that's what they're going for, lean into it, right? So whatever they're practicing, I guess it is still kind of the strength-based practice there too, but work that concept that they're struggling in to your daily practice, however it works for
yeah.
your learner.
I actually remember learning French that way, but looking at the back of the cereal box, because I'm Canadian. So I would look at the back of the cereal box or whatever. I would start to learn some French based on that. And really interesting, neurobiology, you're essentially saying, is teaching us that when our child is bored, this isn't a useful way to help them learn. And I know from this experience as well, and this also is something from neurobiology, that when a child is stressed or frustrated or overwhelmed, their brain is not connecting. It's not actually going to force learning. It won't make it happen. So if you see that your child is really frustrated I entirely empathize that you just want to get this page done or do this one little thing. Wait, you knew this last week. Why can't you now? I've been there, so I empathize with you. And also, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there might be some, skills that I mean, there are going to be some skills they learn from just sticking with something to the end, but it's not really teaching them the concepts you're trying to teach them. It's teaching them grit, which is an important one to learn too. But yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, making it fun.
Yeah.
If you're having, like, make it into a game, relate it to something that they enjoy, make it fun.
Now tell me,
And yeah, we keep saying that, like, neuroscience is going to profoundly change education, and I'm still waiting for it to happen, because there should not be any more dry lectures
do you know,
with what we know about reading and learning.
education in the home education space is one of those revolutionary things, because we are trying to incorporate real learning for very few kids, but real kids right in front of us, and we are trying to use practices that work. We don't have all the extra stuff that's added to, unless of course you come from the education background, which I've heard often. But if we're not from an education background and we're homeschooling, we're just looking at the child in front of us and saying, how can I learn, or how can I help you in some learning thing? And so we look at the child in front of us and ask, how do I frame things? And I think very much the innovation on education is definitely in the home education realm. So I know we are ripe and ready. If I know anything about homeschool moms, it is that we are willing to listen to what will work for our child.
Yeah, and you can, throw out a curriculum and pick another one overnight, right? Like you have the flexibility to do what seems to be working for your kids and change things if they don't seem to be working. Whereas unfortunately in the school system, they're kind of stuck with working in this framework that's slow to change.
Change, yes. Titanic, slow to change. So let's talk about grit. Obviously, there's a overlap between these three concepts about learning and emotional resilience and grit. What are other ways that we can help support our kids to just, be a little more gritty?
Yeah. So, are you familiar with Angela Duckworth's book
Absolutely.
Grit? Okay. So in her book, she talks about this a little bit, but she does say with a caveat that like the research hasn't been done yet to figure out what works great. And I think that's true on a lot of what what we talk about with this because we know certain concepts like neurons that fire together tend to wire together, but will basketball and math, it seems to work, right? I have not done a study and I haven't read one that says, yes, basketball 100% helps math, and we see these changes in the brain. It just like we're still at the very, very tip of the iceberg with neuroscience and what we're going to learn from it and like, the technologies we're developing and everything. Um, so I think that's something to keep in mind whenever you get advice about that's neuroscience based is that like this is still an emerging science,
Mhm.
but she talks about picking an act like a hard thing and then setting an amount of time to stick with it. So in our home, we talk about a hard thing that we want to do, and the hard thing doesn't need to be like it shouldn't be a boring thing or something that's not enjoyable. It should be something that you like, but is challenging. And my kids each pick a hard thing they want to work on. So we usually do it kind of seasonally. My daughter over the summer worked on reading, and then when now she's like ahead, for her age group in reading. That was her choice, right? She wanted to work on reading. So she worked on reading and she did some practice reading every day. My son was trying to remember what he worked on in the summer, but typically he usually chooses math and then he does works through his math workbook. And that's something he really enjoys doing. But we do a check-in generally, like we just were talking about it the other day, and they're still kind of picking what their hard things are going to be for now. But um, yeah, my daughter's the past in the fall, she was doing dance classes, so she decided that was going to be a hard thing was dance. So it could be a sport, it could be a skill, it could be essentially anything that challenges you. And then you make the commitment to stick to it. So I know like um, you know, I think everyone probably as a parent has experienced it where they've signed their kid up for something and then after like one or two practices, their kid is not interested in it anymore. So the beauty of the hard thing is the child is picking that thing.
Mhm.
And then, if they hit the point where they're like, I'm not interested in it, you go, okay, well, we committed to sticking with this for X amount of time and we're going to stick with it for X amount of time unless, something, extreme is going on, like there's an unsafe reason or something like that, that they don't want to stick with it. But yeah, so that's something that we've done, and it's been great in our home, and that was suggested in the Grit book by Angela Duckworth.
I think that's a great idea. In fact, I've been doing that myself. So the women that I am with every Friday in the Confident Homeschool Mom Collective, there's a few of them that are really good at crocheting. I am not, and I never have been. And I have tried and tried and tried. But so I started crocheting again, and it looks horrible. But I was going to send it to them in the mail for Christmas. Turns out Canada Post was strike, so that didn't work. But it's okay because my dog actually ate my homework and was chewing on my little bits of crocheting work. But that has been my form of developing grit in my adult life. Is I'm not ever going to, create a market stand for what I'm producing. I'm just hoping that the dog actually doesn't bite it. And when I make something, it actually turns into, a nice scarf instead of a baby booty, which has been a repeat experience for me. But my intention is to, I can do this. How do I do this? Well, one thing I know I have to do for sure is keep doing it and probably reading a book or watching a YouTube video or something like that. But I think both for us as adults and our kids, we need to develop practices towards that. Of course, life will give us lots of opportunities to move towards grit if we so choose, if we sign up for the hard stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's easy as a adult to say, nah, I won't do that hard thing because there's we are doing hard things. We're raising children, which maybe that could be your choice. This is my thing I'm doing is raising children, which is fair. but
Fair.
but it's also it's great to say, no, I can do this hard thing. I want to learn this. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to set that goal, and that's going to be my grit goal, and I'll stick with it for a certain amount of time. And I mean, our kids are really good at helping us stick with that if we're making our kids do it. They're good accountability partners.
Yeah. Especially if you tell them.
Yeah.
You know,
So my grit projects are usually my books.
yes.
I said my grit projects are usually my books. So I say, I'm going to write another book. That's my grit project.
Oh, I like that. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I love that. One thing that I think, especially with newer homeschool moms, so like in the first 3-4 years, often people are uncertain about their ability to do what they're doing. They feel a sense of imposter syndrome, like, I don't know if I can really be a home educator. And even if they don't say it out loud, there's always the back of the mind, can I really do this? And I think there's an element or a discussion point on grit here too, in that not only do you stick through doing this thing, but when you're trying to do something that's hard, you don't do it unsupported, and you seek out knowledge. And so then read all the books. Like, don't read all the books all the time, but like read a lot of books and learn about child development, to learn about whatever strikes your fancy. But when you do that, you're actually building up your fortitude to keep going and creating those neural networks of connection. Not coincidentally, that this conversation point ties into the other element that we were to speak on, is about personal growth journeys, or signing up for growth. And really, I'm sure the person that's listening is able to hear that all three of these things really interconnect or intersect. And what is it that you have been exploring in your books for kids? And again, Bright Brain is the name of the book series, but what have you been learning about growth journeys or personal growth and the connection to grit and emotional resilience?
So in the new book, it is like it actually has a section at the back that has a list of like the growth mindset lessons from it. But it's like throughout the book, it introduces these things like the concept of yet, and the overcoming challenges. Like the character falls off of an obstacle and doesn't just give up. She tries going at it a different way, and and so it's showing those concepts of grit and introducing those concepts of growth mindset in a story so that it's interesting, and it's not dry and boring. And as we like talking about learning needing to be emotional, sometimes I have students who are in university or college learning psychology that buy these books because
Yeah.
they'll remember them. They remember the concept. Where their textbook's dry, these are interesting.
Yeah,
um,
that's my experience with any of those. Anything you can find in a children's section, nonfiction, well, fiction, but nonfiction children's section. There are loads of books that take real complicated stuff and simplify it. And the beauty of those books, really.
yes, absolutely.
So
Um,
tell me about that, because that one was one that, did I hear it with Angela Duckworth, or who's the gal that writes the book about personal growth? That's a different person. But this concept of yet, I think, is pretty profound.
Mindset, is that the one you're thinking of? Or
Carol
by
Dweck.
Carol Dweck. Yeah, yeah,
So
yes.
she came up with the idea of yet, or have you heard that from someone else?
I believe it is a growth mindset term. I
Yeah.
can't remember if she actually was the one that introduced yet, or if it was somebody that took her learning and, used it to create concepts. I'd have to, it's actually on my list to reread Mindset because I think I read it twice, but it's been a little while. So I'll let you know when I reread it whether it's actually in there. But it is a growth mindset concept of yet, and adding yet to the end of your sentence. So if you say I can't, add the word yet, because it changes the way you're thinking. So it's going to encourage you to recognize that there at some point you might be able to do this thing. And encourage your kids to use it too. Though sometimes, in my experience, they get frustrated. And I don't want to say yet, but they have to stick with the idea that I'm teaching them the concept, even if it doesn't look perfect in application.
Yes, exactly. Yes, because none of it's flawless. Everything that we engage our kids on, emotional regulation or, boundaries within our family dynamic, all of those things happen, but then they also don't happen. Somebody was asking me yesterday about certain things that I learned over the course of time. And I said, ooh, that's like me writing my memoir. But then I said, here's generally what I learned. And then I said, but I learned it messily. Like there's no black and white. There was no, yeah, now I figured it out. I read the book, I'm done. Or I went to the therapist, now I'm done. No, it didn't work like that. Many iterations.
Yeah, you learn it again and again and again before it sticks, which is why you need to reread things because you forget what's in them. And I mean, I think every time I have a kid, I have to re-figure out who I am.
Yes.
So,
Well, yeah,
so you have to learn a bunch of these things
yeah,
too.
they each mirror different things for you, which is really fascinating, very fascinating. It's so interesting that when we're pregnant with them, or if we're pregnant with them, but when we're pregnant with them, we think, okay, how many times did they kick this hour? How does that reflect who they are as a person? And I actually do think it would be trackable if you went back, but you can't really know what they're going to be like. And they continue to grow and develop. But when you look in hindsight, you're like, well, they were always that. And you never chose that, but they were put there in the world for you to learn from. That I know for sure. They act as our little mini mirrors, is what I've learned, which is very cool. And it's a big growth journey. Yeah.
Scary sometimes.
It's not what I thought I was signing up for. I don't know what your experience was. I thought it was just going to be fun. Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be easier than it is, that's for sure.
exactly. Yeah, it's exactly. So choosing to sign up for a growth journey is really handy, especially as a mom, but also as a mom who is, leading our kids, guiding our kids, and showing them that things aren't always easy and everything isn't always a direct line to what we want, but that you are actually capable of growing and, even learning through the hard things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So where do we find your book?
So you can find it on my website, jennymouse.com. I am in Canada, so if you are in Canada, the shipping rates are fairly reasonable. If you're outside of Canada, they might be a little high for you. So they're also available on Amazon. Um, so you can also search them on Amazon, find them on there, and then the beauty of that is there's an ebook available if you're an ebook person, and there's print books on there too that you can order to pretty much anywhere in the world, almost anywhere in the world. There are some weird places that don't really, not that they're weird places, but there are some places that don't really get Amazon too well, or the shipping fees are really, really insane. But
Well, that
most places in the world.
really seems hard for me to believe that Amazon can't deliver somewhere in 2 days, but I'll believe
I
it.
shipped a couple of books places,
Yeah.
realizing that you can't just ship it through Amazon because sometimes I'll, send a book through Amazon to someone, and yeah, there's a couple places that are really hard to ship to.
Amazing. Oh yeah, no. So you're in Ontario, right? Is that
I'm in Ontario, yeah.
I'm on the other side of the country. Oh, so interesting. So you know Canada Post thing. My heart felt for everyone that was small business and trying to send products. That was the hardest thing, is to hear that small businesses were really suffering. Yeah.
Yes, it was after my book launch too. So yeah, fun stuff.
Oh, oh no, I feel for you. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was,
yeah.
may it succeed, because I think these, especially those kinds of books, like kids books, just like you said, kids or students in psychology programs or in science programs that are wanting to learn neurobiology. This is so accessible, and it just is so clear. But doing it with your kids, so helpful to learn about learning, learn about their emotions, learn about how to do hard things, learn about signing up for a growth journey since they are in this life as a human being. All those things really useful.
We
Yeah,
all have might as well learn to use it.
exactly. Wow. This has been such a rich and meaningful conversation. So thank you, Jenny, for sharing your wisdom and your experience about all these things. I encourage you to check her website out at www. Or is it https?
Yeah, www.jennymouse.com.
mouse.com. Well, as we
Mm-hmm.
wrap up, I want to leave everyone with the thought that you can reimagine your homeschool life because it isn't about getting everything right. It's about creating a space where your family thrives, where they can connect and where they can grow together in a way that feels genuinely expressive or reflective of who you and your kids are. So if today's discussion resonated with you and you're looking for more tools, you're welcome to check out the Reimagine Your Homeschool mini course, which you can find on my website, www.capturingthecharmedlife.com, and also listen to the Homeschool Mama Self-Care podcast episode out today, the 6 challenges every struggling homeschool mom faces and how to transform them. Thank you so much for joining me today, everyone, and especially Jenny. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye.